Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Patrick Smith here at Foundation Software, and we are going to get started here in a couple minutes. We've got a few folks trickling in yet, so we'll give everybody just another minute or two to connect, and then we will get you going here. Everybody should see my screen. Should see my cursor moving around. I've got you on the little desktop graphic here. And you all are in listen-only mode, so you'll be able to hear me. I'm not going to hear anything from you. It'll be a pretty quick one today, figure 15, 20, 25 minutes. And if there are any kind of questions, there's a little questions panel in the GoToWebinar control panel. You can feel free to type those in as needed, and I'll address them toward the tail end of the presentation. Quick ones like this, we usually don't get a ton of questions, but you can absolutely feel free. And like I said, we'll cover those toward the tail end. All right. Yeah, looks like we're all set here. So I'm going to jump into Foundation, pop up the main menu. Now, before we get started, for anybody that is not familiar with Foundation, we do construction accounting and project management. So we only work construction. That is all we've ever done. We have been in the industry for about 30 years, 35, 36 years now. And what we're seeing here is the Foundation accounting program. This is our backbone. This is really what our company is dedicated to. We do have a couple apps as well, project management, mobile timekeeping. We'll dip into the mobile piece here in a bit. But again, for anybody that's not familiar with us, construction accounting, that is our bread and butter. So the topic of today's webinar is the secret to job costing. Truly, there's no real secret to it. It's twofold. It is entering data properly, and it is utilizing an in-depth program like a Foundation software or the equivalent that has the checks and balances to automate the job cost reports, to provide accuracy, to eliminate double entry. So again, the data entry, of course, that's first and foremost, making sure things are coded properly, but having those checks and balances built into a program, that is paramount as well. Again, just to make sure that things are going to the right place. So what I'm going to do to start with here is jump into what we call our executive dashboard. Excuse me. And this will give everybody some perspective on our job cost capabilities. So this is really what you get in the end, provided that data is entered properly and it is checked and balanced. So this is really the end result to give everybody a feel for what a system like Foundation can provide. So the thought behind our dashboard is you can start on a very summarized level, just see how are we doing overall as a company, and then you can drill down into greater and greater detail. So in my example here with my dashboard, you can all see that I'm running about 9 million in active jobs or contracts, and I've billed about 6 million against those contracts. We're also able to see an estimated versus actual cost, as well as an estimated versus actual gross profit. So the contract values, the cost estimates, those are going to pull from the job setup. The actuals, like the revenue, like the cost, those are going to feed into these reports by way of the day-to-day accounting entries. Now, each job over on the right side are what make up those totals on the left. If a user wants to see these jobs laid out in a report format, you can click this button that says View Report. That drills down to the WIP schedule. Now, in Foundation, there's a few different versions of the WIP report. This is a pretty simple one that's built into our dashboard, but in any event, it's an automated WIP, the percentage of completion, the over and under billing calculations. This truly is our backbone, getting these WIP reports automatically generated. Now, from the WIP, any job that you want to look into further, click that job number, and it drills down into a summary of that specific job. Contract amount, what's been billed against it, estimated cost, actual cost, gross margin, change orders, percentage of completion. So these are all numbers for that single job that we clicked into. And then from here, anything that's blue, that means you can continue to drill down further. So this example, I've got this estimated cost, $449, and I'm sitting at an actual cost for this job, $197,000. If I click the link that says job cost detail, that's where you're going to see the breakdown of various cost codes that account for the estimated versus actual. So with today's attendees in mind, I see a lot of you folks are using QuickBooks. It's a natural progression. Majority of our clients, they're coming off of QuickBooks. Others come off of legacy construction software, some of the old systems that are still floating around out there. And cost coding, job costing in general, always a priority. So for those that were to use cost codes, they're customizable, they are unlimited. These are just my examples. General contractors of the world typically use the standard CSI divisions. Specialty subs typically have more custom cost codes. So again, these are only examples. And then you'll see here, if I click any of these cost codes, here's the breakdown of labor for that particular code, material cost, subcontract, equipment, burden. We call these cost classes. Now, again, with accuracy of information, it all depends on what is entered on the front end to make sure these numbers are going to the right place. Labor, for example, in foundation, that's populated by way of payroll time cards. Material, that's populated by way of AP entry into the invoicing, or for those that have inventory, doing inventory transfers to expense to the job. So these estimated cost values are pulling from the job setup. These actuals are pulling from the day-to-day entry. If I want to see how this 4,200 in labor breaks down, I can click labor, and that's going to show all of the transactions that account for that labor cost that fed directly in from payroll. Excuse me. So it's great in theory. These numbers are going to the right place, provided they're coded properly, and that could be labor. Material is another example. You can see I've got a couple transactions that fed in from accounts payable. Can click either transaction number to see the detail of that respective AP invoice. And then with foundation in particular, we do have document imaging where a user can click this little paperclip icon, and that would allow them to drill down into an image of that material invoice or whatever type of transaction it happens to be. So this is the end product. This is the job cost automation, the reports that they're automatically generated here. How we can get accurate numbers in here is based on a couple different things. Now I'm going to back up here to show everybody how to set up a job. And there's a neat feature on the job setup that can help with that accuracy. And then we'll get into some of the day-to-day entries as well. Now on that job setup, if a user creates a new job in Foundation, and I'm just going to pull up one of my existing jobs here. So I've got the sample job, and there's a number of different criteria that you can tag to the job, assign the PM and tell the system where the job is located. These are all customizable drop-downs. As an FYI, we do provide automated certified payroll reporting, not really the topic of today, but for those that have your prevailing wage, needing certified payroll, just know that we automate that process as well on the payroll side. We also automate retainage, so creating AIA pay applications and that type of thing. These are built into our system as well. Again, just kind of FYI information. So what I'm getting at here is we've got a job that's got an estimated cost of $675,000. Now I can come up to this budgets tab and break that 675 down into those different cost codes and cost classes. If I click the cost codes button, this would pull up a master list of cost codes. Again, this is unique to each client. This would be your list of cost codes, and then whatever codes you're looking to budget for this job, drag and drop or double click. So the check and balance here is from an entry standpoint, whether it's accounts payable invoices, time cards in Foundation, time cards through the mobile app, users have the ability to select one of these 4 cost codes out of my 100 some odd code list. So check and balance wise, particularly on the labor side of things, they're not just picking some random cost code. It has to exist on that job's budget. Otherwise, they're unable to make that entry. So that is one neat little feature in Foundation that provides for the accuracy and eliminates somebody, again, just picking one of those random cost codes just to get the entry made. So when I do add these codes, we can create a budget. For my first code, site work, here's my labor budget, here's my material budget. Go to the next code, break that one down, go to the next code, break that down. Now, as an FYI, we do have the ability to import budgets as well. So anybody out there that's using an estimating program that you might want to feed numbers into Foundation, or there's a lot of folks out there that have custom Excel spreadsheets for estimating, we do have the ability to import these numbers just to save keystrokes. And whatever numbers exist here, whether they're entered in manually or imported in, these are the numbers that would automatically feed into those respective job reports without having to transpose into a spreadsheet or go elsewhere to get those numbers into like a bolt-on type software. This is a good example of the integration in our software. Set the job up, get the budget in, run those reports, and you'd see those numbers immediately. Okay, so with that in mind, once a job is set up, users can now enter against that job. From a payroll standpoint, I'll give you an example here. A user could absolutely enter a time card for those field employees. So anybody that is getting a paper timesheet has the ability to code to the job and to a cost code. And then you can just plug those hours in. If it's an easy one, you see here, this guy's on this job doing demo, 8 hours a day. Everything else will default in. So that's another example of the defaulting. It limits the keystrokes here, and it does provide for accuracy rather than, again, having to pick up these labor costs and enter them somewhere else to get a job report generated. So manual entry into the payroll module, we'll see a handful of clients go on that route these days. Most prefer to use our mobile timekeeping. And with the mobile timekeeping in mind, we do have an approval process here for those time cards. So this is getting into another check and balance, another item to ensure that accuracy. An employee could clock in and clock out via the mobile app, and this could be clocking into both a job and to a cost code. So if a user comes in here to create a time card, this might be each employee that's sort of doing their own thing. They can clock into both a job and to a cost code. Now, for those that prefer not to go clock in and clock out, we have what we call the single time card. This allows the user to just enter a time card. So pick the name, the job, the cost code, plug those hours in, save it. Next day, do the same thing. Our mobile app has a third option that we call the grid time card. Now, this is where we'll see a lot of folks gravitate getting into the accuracy of coding. You know, the reality is some clients out there, some companies, they can rely on each employee to code their time cards properly. Others, I can't get these guys to select the proper time cards. They're busy working on the job. So a lot of times we'll see a supervisor foreman entering time for a crew. And this grid time card provides for an easy way to accurately break those hours down. So if I'm a supervisor, for example, let's start a new time card for job number 1, and I tap next. Here's my default crew. We can remove employees, we can add employees, make adjustments on the fly. Tap next again. Here are the cost codes that we're going to perform today. And then you'll see when I start this time card, here's my crew on the left. Here are those cost codes across the top. And now we can break those hours down, particularly handy if these guys are bouncing code to code. All of this can be done on one screen rather than going employee by employee and rather than relying on each one of those individual employees to code their time properly. Now, regardless of the input method, which could vary, some employees might clock in and out, others might enter a single time card. But most clients have, kind of standards to make sure everybody's doing it the same way, but in theory, it could vary. What I'm getting at is, regardless of the method of entry, there's always an approval process. So whoever's responsible to approve, maybe a supervisor, maybe a project manager, hey, let's pop in here, let's make sure everything looks good, make sure everything's coded properly, then submit the time cards into payroll, into the accounting system, and then see that real-time job costing hit that job and that respective cost code. So with labor, there's methods. There is the check and balance to make sure that codes on that budget are the only ones being used, and there's the approval process before everything gets submitted in to job cost properly. Now, on the accounts payable side of things, similar concept. There's an approval process here within Foundation. One thing to note here, and this is an example of the automation as well, when a vendor is set up in Foundation, so we're getting into the AP side, defaults can be set on the vendor, including a cost code and a cost class. So I can tell the system, anytime I use Vic Industrial as a vendor, anytime I put an invoice in for them or a purchase order, it defaults to that particular cost code. So we ensure that those numbers are going to that particular cost code and there's no guessing on which code it should go to. So this is code 5010 for Vic Industrial Supply. When I go to enter an invoice for Vic Industrial Supply, I can take advantage of that defaulting. So here's that vendor. Let's code it to a job. Here's the invoice number. Here's the date of that invoice. We'll just throw it in for $1,000, and then you'll see across the bottom here, automatically it pulls that code. It pulls that cost class. If a user wants to override, absolutely override. It's just a default. But if anything, it does default that code in, eliminate the keystroke, and making sure that it is going to that proper code. So from here, could leave it as is. Invoices in, let's go ahead and process it. Let's get that vendor paid whenever we're ready to process those payments. We do have that approval process, like I'd mentioned, similar to what we have on the time card piece. This is all by way of our document imaging module. So when accounts payable enters an invoice, they can take that respective image, whether it's physically scanned or a lot of vendors these days are emailing, just save that attachment, drag it and drop it in upon entry. So whether it's physically scanned or just picked off of an email, drag and drop that image. It's now associated to this transaction. We can then route this for approval, which could go to an individual approver. It could go to a group if there's more than one person that needs to approve that invoice. So we route accordingly. And then what the approver, or approvers if there's more than one, what they can do is come into document imaging and see their pending invoices. So these transactions, prior to being approved, they're pending. They have not hit the books yet. The approvers can come in, drill down. Okay, let's make sure this went to the right job. It went to the proper cost code. Let's take a look at the image. Now, if it's good to go, they approve it. And now accounts payable has the go-ahead to process that invoice. If it's just a flat-out bogus entry altogether, let's reject it. Or getting into the checks and balances, maybe it went to the wrong cost code. Let's give them the ability to revise this, code it properly, then give accounts payable the go-ahead to process that invoice. So very much a team effort. You know, accounting does their thing, approvers do their thing. Everybody's on the same page without any kind of disconnect, or emails going back and forth, or physical pieces of paper being traded. This is all done by way of a workflow in the software without having to jump through hoops to get these things approved. All right, so we've set the job up, we've allocated our cost codes, we've entered our payroll to get that labor in, and just as a quick FYI there, for anybody that may not have seen that, we allocate both the raw labor and the burden to the job. So however that time card is coded to the job and to the cost code, that burden will follow the labor. Another example of accurate job costing, we're not just guessing at burden rates here. We could help you build workers' comp rates and unemployment rates and FICA that you're paying as an employer, prevailing wage fringes, union fringes for any union contractors that are out there. So truly accuracy on job costing, that burden, it's a pretty good chunk of the expense. That would allocate to the penny by following the labor to the job and that cost code. So labor and burden are allocated by way of payroll. Material, subcontract costs, those are allocated by way of accounts payable. And you can issue POs and subcontracts through our system as well, apply the invoice against it. That is no problem. And outside of job costing, when we're getting into the revenue side of things, just so everybody is aware here, this is kind of deviating from the accurate job costs. But you can see here, for those that run pay apps and AIAs, bill by dollar amount, bill by percentage, get those numbers in, default retainage, it'll pull right from the job. And this is just to kind of show everybody that we have these out there. So you can then create that pay application straight out of our system, PDF it, print it onto a blank sheet of paper. So again, not really the secret to job costing. We're getting more into the revenue side of things, but just know that this is out there for anybody that does run those AIAs. All right, complete crash course, lot to take in. I'm going to check the question panel here, and let's see if anybody has questions, and then we'll let you get back to your day. All right, so bear with me. Okay, question came in to explain the difference between a cost code and a cost class. So a cost code, and I'll jump back to my dashboard to give a visual. Figure a cost code is a task. It's whatever the employee is performing, or not only the employee, but whatever task or component on that job you would like to expense the cost to. So figure the cost code is the task or the item on a job, and then the cost class would be the type of cost. Is it labor? Is it material? Is it subcontract? With that in mind, plenty of clients out there that don't need the cost code. All they're looking to do is track total labor for that job, total material cost for that job. So for those that don't use cost codes, you would just see totals here. For those that were to use cost codes, then you can see the breakdown of each one of those classes underneath those respective cost codes. So cost codes are optional. Most use them, but definitely nothing that you'd have to use. All right, let's pop back into the questions. Okay, another question. This is a good one. How does payroll work for salary supervisors if you need to add the jobs that they're on? So in Foundation, we have a salary proration option where a user can enter hours onto a time card. Could be multiple jobs, multiple cost codes for any salary employee. It'll just take their salary, divide it up based on how those hours are distributed, still pay the employee that flat salary. So it's a way to enter hours, automatically divide the salary up, but still pay them that flat amount. Okay, let's see here. Okay, question came over, does Foundation have its own, let me read this, time collection app? We do. So the time collection is the Foundation mobile piece that we use to enter those time cards and to get those time cards approved. Yep. So there's a couple options on the mobile side of things. This is what we call Foundation Mobile. So it's a pretty basic app. It's easy to use, not a ton of bells and whistles. For those that have done some homework on us recently, we acquired a company, this is going back a few months now, called About Time Technologies. They have a mobile system, or I should say we, because they're part of Foundation now, have a mobile app called WorkMax. Now WorkMax, that is more of a heavy-duty timekeeping app with biometrics and a lot of bells and whistles, custom forms, and that type of thing. So this is really just kind of a simple app for timekeeping. We do have the WorkMax available as well for anybody that's needing a little bit more heavy-duty functionality on the mobile piece. All right, let's circle back here. Okay, bear with me. Okay, question came over. How closely is our project management, or how close can it come to replacing Procore? Honestly, Procore is pretty heavy duty. I mean, that's a really in-depth mobile system. They've got a lot of neat features like portals for the outside world, like subs and owners and architects to log into. Yeah, a lot of features. So tricky to replace Procore. Our project management app we call Project HQ. And there's some webinars on our website and on our YouTube page for anybody that wants to poke around and learn a little bit more about Project HQ. Same general concept as a Procore. We've had Project HQ out for about 3 years now, so not to the level of a Procore, but that's the path. It's just based on demand out there. It's what everybody's looking for. So yeah, that's something that long term, but yeah, to replace Procore today, a little bit tricky. All right. A lot of questions being fired in here. Probably won't be able to get to all of them. I'm going to pick one last question off. And what's going to happen here is everybody's going to get an email with this demo or with this webinar recording. You can feel free to circle back on it. And for anybody out there, it looks like there's some foundation clients that are on the line here as well, which is great. You learn a little bit more here. But for any of the non-foundation clients that are logged in, anybody that is wanting to dig a little bit deeper here and maybe explore a system a little bit further, get in touch. Anybody in our sales department can help you. We'll get you on the calendar for a demo, figure about an hour just to take you through this thing, see if it'd be a fit for your company. But that's always on the table. So yeah, one last question here came over: how to allocate equipment costs. So equipment costs, yeah, that is really similar to a time card. So we've got this equipment module that allows the user to enter equipment usage directly to the job in the cost code. And then we've got the same functionality on the mobile app where a user can enter that equipment through the mobile piece to the job in the cost code. And this could be entered independent of the time card, or we do have the ability to include an equipment dropdown right on that time card, so you can kind of kill two birds with one stone, get that labor and the equipment entered at the same time. Regardless of that, however it's entered, those equipment expenses will hit the job as owned equipment. And how it knows what expense to allocate is based on a couple things here. When an equipment item is set up, you can give it a cost rate. So let's say it's $120 an hour. Got to start somewhere. Some start with a Blue Book rental rate. Others start with their own rate that they've had over the years, internal formulas and whatnot. So let's just say that we expense this at $120 an hour. Those hours are coming in, that expense is hitting the job. And then we've got a really handy report here that we call usage versus cost that helps tighten that rate up. So I'm using $120 an hour for that dozer, and I've expensed $13,000 to my various jobs that dozer's been used on based on actual expenses, service expenses, overhead, fuel. The system will tell you this thing's really costing you $71 per hour. You're overstating that cost. You've got a variance here. So you get into that dozer setup, you bump it down from 120 to 71. Now you're a little bit more accurate on those expenses that are hitting the job. Never an exact science. This variance you ideally want floating around zero, but if anything, use this report to tighten that rate up, and then your job reports are a little bit more accurate. All right. With that in mind, we will go ahead and wrap it up here. I appreciate everybody sitting in. I hope you learned something. Hope you got a little bit out of this thing. So like I said, my name is Patrick. If anybody wants to reach out with questions or to look a little bit further, you can reach out to me directly. Again, anybody in our sales department can help you and get you pointed in the right direction. So be on the lookout for that email. You'll see it come over with the demo recording. And then if there's anything we can help with, feel free to get in touch, and we will go from there. Appreciate everybody's time. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.